talking about fractions today and equivalent fractions. You know what a fraction is. It's a number in the form of a over b, where b cannot equal 0. A is called the numerator, b is the denominator. This should be a review for most of you. So we're going to talk about what an equivalent fraction is. It's fractions that represent the same numbers. If 3/6 of your donuts were chocolate ice, that meant half of your donuts were chocolate ice. So to find equivalent fractions, which is what you'll be asked to do in this section and later on, you multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So in our first example, I have 1/5. So if I wanted to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number, that would be 2 over 2. My equivalent fraction would be 2 over 10. Because I multiply the numerator and denominator by really a 1. Let's say 6 over 18. If I wanted to find an example that was equivalent fraction to that, what if I divided the numerator and the denominator by 2? I would have 3 over 9. It is just as if you were multiplying or dividing by 1. So now we're going to write two fractions that are equivalent to the given fraction, which means we're going to multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by 1. I'm going to pause the screen. You're going to do an equivalent fraction for A, B, C, and D, and then we'll come back and put our answers up on the board. Now we have put up some equivalent fractions for A, B, C, and D. So we either multiply or divide the numerator and denominator by the same number. And we've done that for each and every example. Let's look at number 5. A fraction is in the simplest form if its numerator and denominator have 1 as their greatest common factor. So for an example of this would be 8 over 15. 8 over 15 cannot be reduced because their common factor is 1. So it is called, in its simplest form, is 8 over 15 because the only factor that they have in common is the number 1. To simplify a fraction, you divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. If you cannot, at the top of your head, figure out what their greatest common factor is, just start off with anything. So for example, in example 1, we have 8 over 28. We know that 2 will go into it, but that's not their greatest common factor. Their greatest common factor is what, class? 4. So if I divided the numerator and denominator by 4, I would have 2 over 7. But if you cannot think of their greatest common factor, start with 2 and just start working your way in. How about in example 2? You would write simplest form because their greatest common factor is 1. Now let's look at number 7. It's asking you to write the fraction in simplest form. Again, the simplest way would it be reduce the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. But if you can't do that, just start with a factor that you know that's in both of them and reduce them. I'm going to pause the video. We'll come back and check the answers. Okay, so let's look at these. We reduced each one by their greatest common factor. The one that sticks out right now would be E. Their greatest common factor was the number 8. You could have still gotten the same answer in the end if you would have divided by 2, but 8 was the simplest one. Again, in G, I divided the numerator and denominator by 10. So that in simplest form is 12 over 35. And H, as we have been reviewing, 13 times 13 is 169. You'll be seeing that quite often. Okay, number 8. We're going to solve the equations by using equivalent fractions. Be sure to state what the variable E equals. So in letter 10, A, 10 over 12 is equal to something over 24. So you need to look at what the information's been given to you. What did you do to 12 to get 24? You multiplied it times what?
2.
So 10 times 2 is 20. So x is going to equal to 20. This is how you're going to do your answer. That's how you're going to complete your answers. X is equal to 20. Now let's look at B. There are several different ways that you can solve this, but you can look from right to left. What did you do to 11 to get 33? Or what did you do to 33 to get to 11? Either way, you divided by 3. So in B class, what would be y is equal to 13. Okay, I want you to do C and D, and we'll come back and check. In C, x is equal to 20, and D, a is equal to 24. Now let's use this concept in word problems. Now what's really important in word problems is you need to understand what the question is asking and taking all the information. Number 9, you read 35 pages of a chapter in a book and you have 15 pages left. What fraction of the chapter have you read? Write the fraction in simplest form. In your word problem, you have read 35 pages and you had 15 pages left, which meant when you added those two together, there were 50 pages in the whole book. So the question was asking, write the fraction of the chapter that you've read. So you've read 35 out of 50 pages. Then you simplified that to 7/10. Okay, on our last slide, another word problem. I'm going to read it out loud. I'm going to ask for you to solve it on your own. At a basketball game, the home team made 14 out of 22 free throw attempts. The visiting team made 10 out of 25 free throw attempts. Write a fraction for the number of free throws made by each team. Are the fractions equivalent? I'm going to pause the screen again, come back and let you check your answer. So in this word problem, we had 14 out of 22 made, and then the visiting team had 10 out of 25 made. We simplified it. We compared 7 out of 11 to 2/5, and your final answer is no, the fractions are not equivalent. They are not equivalent.